Namaste everyone. Today we have Anil Swarup sir with us. Sir is an Indian author and a retired IAS officer, Indian Administrative Service of Uttar Pradesh cadre 1981 batch. In his 38 years of career, he has served in various capacities and later went on to become the Secretary to the Government of India. Before joining IAS, he worked as an IPS officer, Indian Police Service, for 1 year. He joined IAS in 1981 and is the recipient of Director's Gold Medal for Best Officer Trainee in his batch at Labasana, Lal Bahadur Shastri National Academy of Administration. He has served in various key positions for both the Union government and the government of Uttar Pradesh, like as the Education Secretary of India, Coal Secretary of India, Additional Secretary in the Cabinet Secretariat of India, Additional Secretary of Labour and Employment Empowerment, Export Commissioner in the Ministry of Commerce and Industry of India, and as the District Magistrate of Lakhimpur Kheri during the Babri Masjid Ram Janmabhoomi agitation under the then Chief Ministership of Kalyan Singh. So, sir, thank you very much for being with us here and providing your precious time for us to our channel. Welcome to our channel, Pen Name, sir. Sir, so let us start with this question. Please tell us about your childhood days and what inspired you to become an IAS officer.
Actually, my inspiration came from my father. He wanted me to become an IAS officer. He was himself a government servant. He was an engineer. And I remember when I was about 10 years of age, I saw a piece of paper in which he had worked out how my journey during student career will be traversed for me to become an IAS officer. Of course, I didn't travel exactly the same path that he had suggested, but I had made my dream his dream. And I made an effort to get into the IAS. And in the first year, I qualified, as you read out, in the police service. And thereafter, I got into the IAS. The journey as a student was a very interesting one. I was reasonably okay in studies, but I wanted to win awards like any child would. I wanted to win certificates and medals and cups, but I was not winning any of them. In class 7, I didn't win a single cup, certificate, or a medal. And I used to feel very frustrated. Around that time that my mother used to tell me, your time will come, don't worry. And it was very comforting because she used to tell me that you have no control over results. You have only control over your effort and keep putting in effort.
Oh.
And she used to use these phrases which I didn't understand then.
Yes, sir.
Now, it was life that I discovered. It was much later in life that I discovered the meaning of it.
Okay.
But class 7, I started winning. And then, of course, I won a lot. But why I'm telling you this is just to convey to your audiences that success does not come overnight. It takes a lot. Sometimes it takes much longer than what you think.
Okay.
And in any case, you don't have much of control over success or failure. And I kept discovering them throughout my career. But my effort went on. Like after class 12, wherein I had physics, chemistry, maths as my papers. The focus was not on language, and I switched over to humanities in BA in Allahabad University. And then I made a very conscious effort to improve my written and spoken language, both English and Hindi. It took a lot of effort, sometimes a lot of embarrassment as well, but I managed to improve my written and oral communication skills. And that stood me in good stead, not only in the examination for the civil service, but also in the civil service. I think if you're a good communicator, then you can do many things and get many things done than not being a good communicator.
Sir, what is your message for the IAS aspirants, sir?
It emanates from what I had been talking earlier.
Okay.
You don't really know whether you qualify or not, even the best of persons, like in the first year, I thought I'll qualify for the IAS. I thought I was good enough. I didn't. So you don't really know whether you qualify or not. What you really know is your effort.
Okay.
If you can put in hard work, the chances are that you'll make it. The competition is tough. Without hard work, there is no way that you'll succeed. I mean, a genius. There could be 1 or 2 persons in the entire lot of the civil service who qualify irrespective of the fact whether they worked hard or not. But almost everyone who appeared in the civil service would have worked very, very hard with a focus, with a clear-cut plan, with some guidance. All that is absolutely imperative for anybody to get into the civil service. You have to really plan it out. You have to give up everything else, single focus on making it to the civil service. And without sacrifices, I don't think much can be achieved. Again, as I say, It's for common people, not for geniuses, who would have made different sort of sacrifices. But I think most of the people, without sacrificing their comfort, their easy living, without that discipline, it would be very difficult to get into the civil service, more so now than during my time.
Oh, very good message, sir. Thank you very much, sir. And so coming to the present situation, we are facing a threat on dual front due to the pandemic. One is the virus threat, and the other is the lockdown threat. What are your thoughts on that, sir?
See, as far as the virus threat is concerned, it is not under our control. It's arrived, it's troubling us. So we have to live with it and we have to accommodate accordingly. There's no point in cribbing over the virus existence. It is there. So when such situation gets given to you and it's not of your own making, then you have to evolve and work in a manner so that you make the best out of the given set of circumstances. So the virus is there. As far as the lockdown is concerned, I think now the situation is much more serious. Last time, probably it was not as serious as that. Now, lockdown gets necessitated because the people in general do not follow COVID norms. I would still believe that if we follow a discipline and follow COVID norms, lockdown may not be required. But I'm shocked and appalled at the manner in which a large number of us behave. So, for example, you had the Ganga Ashnan, and there was already panic with regard to virus, but we had that Ganga Ashnan. Look at the election rallies. What was the logic of having those rallies when the virus was raging in the country? People were dying, we still had election rallies. Now we do all that, then the only option left is lockdown. How do you help it? So a lot depends on people at large and of course leadership, because leadership has to show the way that it is not speaking or behaving in double standards. If they see that virus is around, what was the logic of holding those election meetings? It was a shocker, absolutely. And then I saw advertisements inviting people to Ganga Shnan when it should have been the other way around. We should have stopped them from going. So I think we've partly brought this crisis on ourselves. I mean, there are few things that you can't help. Virus comes. The other things is that we can aggravate it or control it. I think our leadership and many of us contributed to the aggravation of this crisis, and the common man will suffer as a consequence of that. Whether lockdown will actually happen or not, only time will tell. There is a feeling that minimize lockdown as much as possible. Only time will tell whether lockdown will happen and to what extent it will happen. But I think we have now deserved what we are getting because we misbehaved. We behaved in a manner unbecoming of a citizen, unbecoming of a leader. We said something, we did something else. I mean, I was aghast. I am very fond of cricket. And I was watching the television and I saw in the VIP area, senior leaders sitting there without masks. It can't happen. It shouldn't happen. People should protest and say, what message is being sent to the public at large when such people who are VIPs are sitting in public glare on television without masks? If that is going to happen, I think we invite trouble for ourselves.
So basically, the leaders and the people, they are acting on their religious sentiments and emotions rather than on scientific basis.
No, it is not as profound as religious sentiments or, what happens is people get led or misled through emotions. The larger the number, greater impact of emotions. And that is where the role of leadership becomes very important. What emotional aspect of an individual they are appealing to. Now, let us assume, for an example, instead of advertising for Gashnan or Kumbh Shnan, the leaders could have gone and said, yes, we appreciate the fact that it's a religious time, but it would be better if you don't come. I mean, at least the appeal should have been the other way around. Similarly, who stopped these leaders from calling off these election rallies? As contrary to that, they were proudly claiming the crowd that had assembled to listen to them. It was a shocker, absolutely.
Okay. Sir, the Election Commission of India, which is supposed to be the watchdog of free and fair elections in our country, do you think it is losing ground somewhere?
I wrote an article, I think yesterday, in which I have myself stated very clearly that there is a major credibility crisis in election commission. The reason is very simple. What is clearly being perceived is that the election commission is not being objective. Some orders that election commission came out with very recently with regard to the election assembly of only 500 could have been brought out earlier. What stopped election commission from doing that? So I'm really surprised, because that's an institution that we were all proud of. That institution, we said that along with UPSC and judiciary were the pillars on which we could take pride in. But what is happening in election commission is again a very, very surprising development, because institutions take a long time to develop, and it doesn't take very long time for that credibility to get destroyed. I'm sorry to say that some of the actions that election commission has taken, I mean, they may have the best of intentions in mind, but are conveying an absolutely different impression. If the election commission had taken upon itself to see that the COVID norms are followed, in a state where election commission had virtually taken over administration, they should have ensured that those norms are followed. Yeah. It's easy for an administration to do that. And they actually came out with a provision, as I said earlier, wherein they now mandate that more than 500 people will not be allowed. Why wasn't it done earlier? That's the question only election commission can answer.
Sir, you have authored a book, 2 books you have authored, sir, Not Just a Civil Servant and Ethical Dilemmas of a Civil Servant. So what are these ethical dilemmas, sir?
You know, this book was necessitated as a consequence of my various visits to the academy, the Mussoorie Academy, Lal Bahadur Shastri National Academy, where I used to interact with officers of various seniorities. They have 5 phases in which training happens. The first phase is for the newcomers, and thereon, after every 5 to 10 years, officers are called back to the academy and they are given inputs. And I had the occasion to meet with a large number of them of various seniorities. And I discovered that when an officer joins the service in the initial part of his career, he's very enthusiastic. He wants to do things, he wants to change things. But as he goes up the ladder, that enthusiasm gets waned, and some of them become cynical. Now, I tried to analyze and discovered that almost all these officers who became cynical, were trying to blame the set of circumstances, including politicians, for their inability to enthuse themselves, inability to do things which they ought to do. And I was trying to convey to them that if you look around, you will find many officers who in these very so-called dismal set of circumstances are performing well. How are they? If the circumstances are so dismal and bad and politicians aren't allowing them to do anything, then how are these officers performing? So my idea was to convey to these officers that lot depends on you. In fact, my book, Ethical Dilemmas of Civil Servant, concludes with the following couplet. खुद ही को कर बुलंद इतना कि हर तकदीर से पहले खुदा बंदे से खुद पूछे बता तेरी रजा क्या है. Meaning thereby that you have to evolve as an individual who can perform. And how to perform, that I've tried to explain in my book, is that you have to seek inspiration from yourself and from those that are performing in these set of circumstances. The choice is with the civil servant. Where does he want to seek inspiration from? Is he seeking inspiration from those officers who are corrupt, dishonest, inefficient, or is he seeking inspiration from those that are honest, efficient, are performing? Both type of officers exist. Numbers we may debate that there are some more here and more there. But point is, there are indeed officers who are honest and efficient. The question is whether I'm looking at those officers like Julius Ribeiro, we are looking at officers like T.N. Session, who did perform despite the adverse set of circumstances. Now, why aren't we seeking inspiration from such officers? So in order to answer these questions, I wrote this book, Ethical Dilemmas of a Civil Servant. The idea was to present before the public at large and the officers that there are indeed dilemmas that an officer faces. The book starts with a couplet which outlines the dilemma. मुख्तसर सी जिंदगी के अजब से अफसाने हैं, या तीर भी चलाने हैं, परिंदे भी बचाने हैं. So there are dilemmas. One can't deny the fact of dilemmas. The question is, how do we understand and respond to those dilemmas? And an officer can actually respond positively. That is the essence of my book, Ethical Dilemmas of a Civil Servant.
Sir, you talked about taking inspiration from 2 kinds of officers, the one who is corrupt and the one who is straightforward. apart from this, do you think it is necessary to have some individual initiative over the dilemma, like proper discipline? Does it play any role?
Ultimately, it is the individual who operates. The inspiration comes to an individual. Inspiration doesn't hang in the air. If I'm talking of inspiration, it comes to an individual. Individual feels inspired. So that individual has to discipline himself. Why should he discipline himself? He looks around and looks at officers who are disciplined, and hence they are revered, they are respected, and they are required. If you look at those officers, then you feel inspired as an individual and follow suit. Do what you feel inspired by. You try and emulate what you think is right and what has worked. Now, why I say that? The reason is simple. Sometimes we can generally talk about that you should be honest, you should do good work. No, I have looked at actual happenings on the ground. There are more than 70 case studies in the book where I give circumstances where you could have gone either way. I mean, in the book, actually, I don't say what I did was always right. I have asked questions of some of the actions that I've taken. So it's not a question of my calling it right or wrong. It's a question of person who has to adapt, and then do something on the ground. He has to decide which line of action he has to take. That's the dilemma. My take in the book is that if you have clarity of thought and if you feel inspired by others, then dilemmas for you cease to exist, as I discovered myself. In the earlier part of my career, I did have dilemmas. I was not very clear as to what path I should take. As I went along in the career later on, I had no dilemma. Dilemmas did exist objectively, but in my mind, there was no dilemma. I was clear that if an officer had to be protected, he had to be protected because he or she had not done any wrong. So if you look at the book and look at the instances, my response in the later part of my career, absolutely clear in mind, this is what I'll do. And I did it. I was conscious of the consequences of what I was doing, and I was prepared for the consequences of what I was doing. And that's where dilemmas will continue to exist. But in your mind, on account of clarity of thought and the experience that you had, those dilemmas will not exist. You'll be able to decide what you got to do. But that clarity will come if you want to imbibe that clarity, if you want to become clear in your head. If you want to continue to confuse yourself, then you'll remain confused. And probably willingly, unwittingly, you'll create problems for yourselves. But if you have that clarity of thought, and if you're aware of the consequence of the action that you take, then you will not have problems.
True, sir, true. Sir, you have authored one more book called Not Just a Civil Servant. So what is this? What is it about, sir? Is it
See,
civil
my
servant is
first
not?
book,
Yes, sir.
my first book was to provide the details of a scheme that I had started, which came to be recognized world over as one of the finest. And the journey that I undertook, it was called the Rashtriya Swasthya Bima Yojana, the National Health Insurance Scheme, which was appreciated world over. But I started writing Violence Service itself about this scheme. But subsequently, I had assignments like Secretary Coal, Government of India, Secretary Education, which are very exciting. So I added these additional chapters to make it into book. Now, the fundamental principle in my first book is that a civil servant has to be beyond a civil servant, as it is normally understood. Because if you talk to a common man on the street, he will think of a civil servant as a bureaucrat who, wound up in red tape, who doesn't take decisions, doesn't do things. There is a negative image that emerges in the mind of a common man when you mention the word bureaucracy or civil servant.
True.
Hence, you have to be beyond a civil servant. That's why the title is Not Just a Civil Servant. Obviously, you have to be a civil servant because you are a civil servant, but you have to be humane, you have to be accessible, you have to be proactive. There are many other attributes which are not normally associated with civil servant have to be there. And that's what the first book is all about, not just a civil servant. That is beyond the generally perceived understanding of civil servant. That's what Not Just a Civil Servant is all about.
Okay, sir, who has to take accountability to the damage done by the pandemic to the middle class and the poor, sir? Because
I don't know who should be held accountable. I'm not a great believer in holding accountability. I have no idea as to who should be held accountable. I'm a great believer in managing the situation as it exists. So we'll talk about accountability later. Right now, there is a situation before us. Let's get down together and contribute in whichever way. So, for example, your audience who are going to listen to this, My suggestion and request to them is, yes, it is natural to be critical of things not happening, but your contribution should not be merely by way of criticism. Your contribution should be by way of a positive contribution. And what is that positive contribution? Follow COVID norms to the hilt. Wear the mask appropriately, not just here. It has to be worn appropriately. Maintain a distance that is required of you. Get yourself vaccinated if you can. So these are COVID disciplines that you have to follow. Now you can keep criticizing, he didn't do this, he didn't do that, he should have done this. That is okay. I mean, that's very natural to us. But I think equally natural to us should be our own commitment to following the COVID norms. To me, that is much more important rather than holding people accountable. Yes, over a period of time, probably some people will be or will not be held accountable. Because here, in India, you don't really hold people accountable. You just forget what has happened. And life is as usual thereafter. But I don't want to comment on that. Right now, we are faced with a crisis. Let's try and handle that crisis the best way we can.
Sir, coming to the vaccine, actually recently we have seen some case that people who are taking that co-vaccine, they have developed some blood clots and some of them have died because of that in UK. Um, so is there a possibility that there is going to be a situation wherein people develop a vaccine hesitancy?
Let us try and understand that's another responsibility that each citizen has. In any rollout, there would be exceptions. In any rollout. I mean, I have yet to see a perfect rollout. Even in polio vaccine cases, there were some adverse reactions in some places. But that doesn't mean that there is something wrong with it. A lot depends on the body that is also taking. I mean, each body is very different. So all tests would have been done, but there could be exceptions here and there. Our job is to dispel such misapprehensions that these vaccines are not good for you. There could be exceptions. There could still be exceptions here and there. But if those exceptions become the rule, then we have a problem. And that's where I think it's our responsibility also to repeatedly convey to whoever we get in touch with that vaccines are generally not harmful. There could be a case here and there. That doesn't mean, because the harm that will come to you by not being vaccinated would be much more than an exceptional harm that might come to you by using vaccine. I say that because I have had myself vaccinated. I'm not talking about generally speaking. I believe that vaccine is by and large good for the people in the larger context. But to say that it is perfect will be incorrect of me. There would still be exceptions here and there. But those exceptions should not determine my behavior. My behavior should be determined by a rule, and we should dispel misapprehensions in the society. We have a lot of duties that we have to perform in this. Don't keep asking government to do this, government to do that. Government has its own limitations. We may keep criticizing some aspects of the government, but the fact of the matter is, what is my contribution in this crisis? And people say, no, I'll sit here and only write things. No, your contribution is first to behave in the manner that you should behave in a COVID context, meaning thereby, as I said earlier, isolate yourself, maintain a safe distance, wear a mask, don't unnecessarily go out, break that chain, get yourself vaccinated. This is something which I should do. And we won't do that and then criticize the government for everything. I am also critical of a few aspects of the government. I mentioned a few things to you.
Yes.
But that doesn't mean that just because some part of someone is not doing something, I will not do anything. On the contrary, I would like to fulfill my duties first before I question anybody else. Am I following them? And that's why I mentioned that cricket stadium thing. I mean, the guys sitting there have been talking about COVID and they were themselves not wearing a mask. That upsets me. Because unless I follow a COVID protocol, I have no moral authority to ask somebody else to follow.
Yes, sir. True. Moral authority. Yeah. So basically, people have to have this behavioral change.
No, what I would suggest is we can generally talk what people should do. My suggestion to all those that are watching this video is start with yourself. The old man and the great man said, be the change you wish to see in the world. If you can't change yourself, how can you ask the world to change? So start with COVID protocols, start with COVID behavior. Do that yourself, and then to your closer circle, try and convey this message that how can we expect others to do things if I am not following that protocol? So start with yourself.
Sir, what might be the path of economic recovery for our country, sir? after this pandemic?
I have great belief in the resilience of this country and its people. I have no doubt that the economy will recover. We are going through a tough phase, but I think that should make us tougher. We have entrepreneurs, we have people who are capable of rebounding. In fact, we were rebounding, but for this second wave. So I have no doubt it will rebound. I don't want to elaborate into details as to what really needs to be done. I can do that, but I don't want to go to that now. But I'm sure there are smarter people than me. They are more knowledgeable than me who will find the path to recovery in this country. However, I am very hopeful. I have a lot of hope and belief in the people of this country that we will come back. We'll come back stronger.
Okay. Sir, can you tell us about technology, sir?
During my career of 38 years, though I myself didn't understand technology a lot, but I probably can take the credit of one of the bureaucrats who used technology to the hilt in carrying out its function. For the simple reason, I very early in my career started believing that technology can be a game changer. If you read my book, Ethical Dilemmas of a Civil Servant, way back in 1990, posted as district magistrate, I used a photocopying machine, which was unheard of in the district, to do away with a practice that existed in the record room, which led to a lot of corruption. So that photocopying machine transformed the practice in that particular area. I mean, the chapter provides all the details. Mm-hmm. It was then that I started discovering the strength of technology. And right through my career, I used it, whether as export commissioner, whether as head of the project monitoring group, where I used technology to make the office totally transparent. There was no paper, no file. Consequent to using this technology, we cleared projects worth more than 5 lakh crores in 15 months at a time when people were not taking decisions. This is UK2. The entire coal block auctions was conducted without paper, without anything. It was done on the internet. Everything was transparent. Yeah. Actually, I also believed that a lot of corrupt practices can actually dispensed with, can actually be dealt with if we use technology. And there are many chapters in my book outlining this. In education also, I think in the department, we didn't have a file or a paper. So there were no delays, so to say. The moment you have that, delays will go. So the speed money part of it gets taken care of. So technology can be a game changer in governance. Even after retirement, I'm associated with a few organizations who are trying to eliminate physical interface between common man and the government. If it could be replaced by technology, if you can use internet through which you can do it, whether it was education, where technology can also be a game changer. So to me, technology plays a very, very vital role in improving the lives of individuals. My first impression of technology and its use came when in railway reservation, we had those digital dealing with railway reservation. It did away with so much corruption. It made life so much easy. It was then that I was gradually realizing that technology can be game changer. I still say that I don't understand so much of technology, but I know how technology can be used to relieve the burden of the common man.
Okay. Definitely, sir. Technology can be a game changer, but today we have upcoming technologies, and technology has grown so much that we have quantum communication, artificial intelligence, and with the government giving a boost to Digital India initiative, do you think our country is ready to face cyber security threats?
Cyber security threats is a very grave issue. But just because we face a threat, we should not get into it. I don't agree with that. I think we should continue to delve into finding ways and means to ward off these cyber security threats. But there are a large number of areas where cyber security is not that big an issue. But on the basis or apprehending cyber threat, we don't use technology. I don't agree with it. There are certain areas where there could be cyber threat. And I think all work should be done. But a large chunk of use of technology doesn't face any cyber security threat. If that be the case, why aren't we using it? For example, I had been advocating that we should digitize all the files in the office. What is the cyber security threat to that?
Nothing.
I mean, in the year 2000, I was chairman APIDA, which is a government organization. And when I moved a proposal for digitizing payments, because ICICI Bank had just started this, people were aghast. They said, there will be a scandal. Then I had to explain to them how it would not be a scandal. And we used it for the first time. Now, of course, everyone uses it. No,
Yes,
lot of people don't use cash; they're using digital transactions.
yes,
Same is the case with offices. Why should offices have hard files now? If the moment you have digital files, no officer will be able to sit on files because many others will know who's sitting on which files for how much time. Once that happens, they will fast track things. You can do away with a lot of problems that we have in governance through use of technology. So let us not be overawed by cyber threats. There are issues relating to cyber threats. We should work towards it, but that should not become a reason for us not to go digital.
True, sir. True. Sir, actually, you became the secretary of Coal India after that scam, no, sir. So how did you deal with that? You actually made the
It
options
was
very transparent. Yes, sir.
Begin with, when I was posted as coal secretary, I didn't know much about that sector. I had read in the newspapers things had gone wrong and like. So I rang up a friend of mine and asking him how's the coal sector. So he, instead of answering my question, asked me a question. Have you seen Gangs of Wasseypur? No, I don't know whether you heard of the movie. That movie is all about mafias in coal sector. Okay. So that was an answer to me. And indeed, when I joined the coal sector, things were terrible. Everyone thought that mafias were a problem in coal sector and scams were a problem. But I soon discovered that the real problem was shortage of coal. World over, mafias have come up on account of shortages. So I was then clear that if you do away with shortages of coal, then neither will scams happen nor will mafias exist. So my entire existence as coal secretary in 2 years was to increase coal production. And that again is a long story which is there in my book. I don't want to go into the details, but we managed to sort it out. Coal production increased by 33 billion tons in 2014-15, which was more than the cumulative increase in the previous 4 years. In 15-16, on top of this record production, we had an additional production of 44 million tons. Now, we arrived at a situation where we were so comfortable that we were toying with the idea of exporting coal to Bangladesh. Now, this, to my mind, was probably the real coal story. Though, like you mentioned, everyone thinks that I had since brought about the transparent auction of coal block. That was the real achievement. Yes, that was quite a thing. No one thought that auctions could be done digitally and transparently, which we did. But more important was the increase in coal production. That was the real coal story. And a number of steps were taken. So there was a huge challenge when I took over as coal secretary. It was chaotic in the office because the CBI was after officers and files. No one wanted to commit himself on the files. But gradually, I won the confidence of my team, of the joint secretaries, the additional secretary. And I had such a wonderful team that sometimes jokingly we used to say, give us the Kashmir problem, we just might be able to solve it. That was the positive energy that pervaded in the room where I worked. It was an amazing experience. I loved each moment of it. It was extremely difficult, but thoroughly enjoyed every moment in my capacity as coal secretary.
Sir, actually, in the work environment, what role does positive energy have to play in achieving task?
No, it's one of the big and major factors. That's the difference between people who perform or who are unable to perform. See, try and understand that the objective conditions are same for everyone. So if there's a crisis, there is a crisis for everyone. People who are positive in your thinking, who believe in themselves, are more likely to resolve the crisis and find solutions. It's not that they will find a solution, but the chances of his or her finding a solution are much more if he looks at things positively, because that's how then the mind starts working in terms of looking for solution. Now, if you feel and become a part of a problem and feel terrible for yourself, then the chances are that you will not find a solution. You will curse yourself, you will curse your team, you will curse the surroundings and not find time to find solutions. If you have a positive frame of mind, you will start looking at solutions. Now, as I keep saying, you may not still find a solution, but the chances are if you have that positive frame, you may find a solution. My experience of 38 years in civil service makes me believe that we can find solution to any problem if you have a positive frame of mind.
Okay. Sir, any other message you want to give out to the audience?
My message to the audience is the challenges will come and go. You may not be responsible for the problems around you, You are responsible for yourself. So focus on yourself. Think positively, never give up or give in. Keep trying. The results are not under your control, but effort is. So focus on the present moment. Try and do your best. Derive satisfaction out of the effort that you're putting it. If you get positive results, that's an icing on the case. So never give up. Keep trying.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Very good message for everyone. Uh, our audience will be very pleased with your vast knowledge about almost everything. It's very comprehensive. Thank you for giving us time, sir.
I think all the best to you. I think reach out to as many people as possible, convey as much positive message as possible. And if you find time, visit nexusofgood.org.in. There are a large number of positive stories going on there. Add to those positive stories because we need positivity in this society. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
God bless you.